Hi everyone and welcome to a new edition of We Are Sunderland with myself, Scott Wilson and Dom Shaw, coming to you as ever in association with our sponsors who are the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Well done, we said the last vid was a busy one. This is going to push it close, isn't it?
Fresh off a signing.
Very fresh. Literally,
Yeah,
I'll tell you what is it? It's about 3:30 on Tuesday afternoon. And literally, half an hour ago, if that, Sunderland confirmed the signing of Ronaldo Mandava. Left back has been at Atletico Madrid, had in fact been playing for Atletico Madrid in the Club World Cup. But was released at the end of his contract, or at least had come to the end of his contract with Atletico, has joined Sunderland. Christian Speakman said we had to be patient to finalise the transfer due to his involvement at the Club World Cup, but we're delighted to welcome Reinildo to We side. We feel he's an ideal profile for our fullback position and his experience is a perfect fit for our squad composition. He's shown a real desire to join our club throughout our discussions and to be the first Mozambican to play in the Premier League. There's one to tick off the list. He's highly motivated by this challenge and he has a personality I'm sure our supporters will connect with. So we're looking forward to welcoming him to Sunderland later this month. He is going to have an extended break because, as we say, he has been out in the US playing for Atletico Madrid. Now Sunderland obviously have Dennis Cirin as a left back. They have Adji Elise, who can play at left back. They've got Leo Hjelde, who can play at left back. But they've identified this as a signing that they wanted to make, a good chunk of time ago. They've had to be patient, as I say, because of his US involvement. I mean, what's your reading on the deal? Slightly different to probably all the other deals Sunderland have made so far this summer.
I think from everything we kind of heard and from what Speakman's saying in those quotes there, you get the impression that clearly he is like hugely talented to play that many games for Atletico Madrid. He is going to offer an awful lot on the pitch. But you get the impression as well, it's the character as well as the experience, clearly, that has really drawn Sunderland to this. Lebris talked all last year, didn't he, about the need for competition all over the pitch. And Elise thought was really good when he was fit last season, but probably better at centre-half. Hjelde, better at centre-half. You do wonder with Hjelde whether he'd maybe benefit from a loan move. I mean, there was the option there in January, wasn't there? But he wanted to stay then. How much football is he going to play? But I think that's a discussion for another day. But I think Mandava will provide crucial competition and cover for Cirin, whose injury record, Cirkin's a class act, isn't he? But will he play 30?
He has had issues in each of the last two seasons. I mean, that's...
and I think just the opportunity, when you go into the Premier League for the first time in 7 years, when you've got a really young and inexperienced squad, the opportunity to add someone who brings the experience of Ronaldo, I think is a no-brainer. And it is different, isn't it? It is different because we'll talk about all the other players and the type of profile. They're all very similar profile, really. Kind of feels like a one-off, but I can completely get it. What'll be interesting is how much does he play? Is Cirin the nailed-on left-back starter when fit? If he is, Reinildo play at centre-half. We know he's played there further forward on the left, but he is a left-back. That's his best position. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, won't it, as the season progresses?
It will, and obviously in the background of all this, you have got the fact, as we've spoken about on previous vids, that Cirin, like Dan Neil, is heading into, well, he's now into the last year of his contract. There's been suggestions of potential interest from Spurs. I mean, I don't for 1 minute think that just because Sunderland have now completed the Reinildo signing, it means that Cirin's on his way out. I don't think we're there in any way yet. But in some ways, it's potentially Sunderland covering themselves just in case there is late movement there, and there could be.
Yeah, I mean, for all, Sunderland are clearly desperate to keep Dennis Cirin and Dan Neil at the club. If Tottenham, for example, were to come in with, I don't know, mega bucks in terms of a young player who's going into the last year of his deal, then clearly Sunderland would have a decision to make. All the indications that Cirkin wants to stay, Sunderland want to keep him. I think the wise money would be on Cirkin signing an extension this summer. But clearly Sunderland need to cover the backs, don't they? And they need to make sure that they are well stocked in every position. It wouldn't surprise me. There was a link earlier today I was reading with a right back. I mean, interestingly, again, it was with a right back who's potentially going for £15 million, and I think that's where it's interesting. You know, we talked about it with the goalkeeper situation, haven't we? If someone was spending £3, £4, £5 million on a keeper, you'd say that's clear cover for Anthony Patterson. Spending £20 million is different. Spending £15 million on a right back, bringing in a left back like Reinildo, who's been playing regularly for Atletico Madrid, they all make you think, don't they, that, as we were saying last week, really, no one's place is guaranteed going into next season.
No, I completely agree. And what this reflects as well is, when we spoke to Christian Speakman at the end of the season, he talked about tweaking the model slightly. He talked about needing a slightly different type of player in the Premier League. He said the general thrust of what we're trying to do as a club, in terms of recruitment, we're not going to change. And I think you see that, don't you? We've seen it with Diarra, we've seen it with Siddiqui. But he made a point of saying, look, we've actually been more flexible in the past than I think we've maybe been credit for. Chris Meffam last season being an absolute prime example of someone who didn't necessarily fit the model, but was signed and made a real positive impact.
Alan
Feels
Brown.
like that's where we're at Reinaldo a bit, doesn't it? That every now and then a player comes up who, is not a development project, is not a player you're signing with a real eye on the future. It's a player you're signing for the here and now. I mean, he's only signed a 2-year deal. So that straight away is different to Sunderland signing up 23-year-olds on 4, 5, 6-year deals, isn't it? It is a different type of signing.
There was a clear change, wasn't there, in the recruitment strategy last summer? Like, clearly they didn't rip it up and start again. Some of them were on to something good. They are on to something good. But Alan Brown and Chris Meffam were signings that they wouldn't have made 12 months earlier, weren't they? They felt like there was a recognition at the end of that season, as the end of the previous season, to we're on to something here, but clearly we need to balance that off. And I know Brown didn't play an awful lot of football, but Labrise at every opportunity talked about his importance behind the scenes, didn't he? And he was quickly part of the leadership team.
Made a certain chip into the box in a game that will never be forgotten.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah. And Meffam as well. I mean, Meffam was a major player, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But then the other signing, so Talbi's going to arrive, isn't he? By the time
let's get on to that next. So Chemsdine Talbi, he's here in the northeast. He's undergone a medical, as far as we understand today. Personal terms already agreed. Fee of around 19.5 million already agreed with Club Brugge. So all things being equal, that should be signing number 5 of the summer, probably in the next 24 hours.
And Talbi, Siddiqui, and Diarra are all the same profile, aren't they?
Yeah,
because
of a type. Yeah.
So and it's clear, like the exact type of like player and signing Sunderland have targeted now. We talked about this at the start of the summer, didn't we? Last year, we keep talking about this. Ipswich targeted like the best players in the Championship. Sunderland clearly want young players who they feel the best years are ahead of them, but who are established, who have been playing regularly. Now, if you go and try and find them or buy them in England, you are going to pay absolutely mega bucks, aren't you? Yeah. So they've clearly identified them on the continent, France primarily, but obviously Belgium as well. And they're all very much, like, clearly the question is, can they, still very early in the career, can they acclimatise to the Premier League? How quickly can they adjust to the Premier League? But it's not like they're signing like Mayenda and Isaac Lee Hadji and Abdullah Bar and all these other types of players who've signed the past, where they're coming right at the very start.
Really raw. Yeah.
These are players who've played, 100 games, senior football, proper level. Talbi was scoring in the Champions League last season. So you can now, we have a real grasp, don't we, of the exact strategy Sunderland have adopted this summer.
Yeah, and pretty much what we said, which was, and listen, what everyone said really, which is that the model, if you like, broadly stays the same, but the level of player you're able to recruit into that model shoots right up, and that's what we're seeing. Like you say, whereas Whereas in the past, Sunderland are signing players who, not only most fans not heard of, but even a lot of football experts wouldn't have heard of. Well, that's not where we're at this summer. These are players with a pedigree, like you say, 50, 100, 150 senior appearances in Ligue 1, in Belgium's Jupiler League, Champions League matches. You wrote a bit on Talbi in the deal, Dom. I mean, what type of player? Where do you think Sunderland see him playing? What's he going to offer?
Comfortable on either flanks, and that was clearly an area that Sunderland needed to strengthen because for all Mundle and Roberts were major players last year, Mundle missed a lot of the season with injuries, didn't he? Well,
Yeah.
Lefay played there a lot, but Labrise took every opportunity to say that that's not where I want him playing. Watson's obviously gone.
Look, I mean, Clark wasn't really replaced like for like, was he? And then
No.
now you say Watson's left off the back of that as well.
And then who are you left as wide players? Jan Poveda? Well, Poveda didn't kick a ball, did he? And let's be honest, it'd be no. So we've wrote a lot about the fringe players. I don't think it'd be any surprise to see Poveda.
Oh.
I'm just pure. I haven't heard or asked.
It might be a surprise to see him.
Yeah. So you are left with no other options really on the flanks, other than like playing Mayenda, a place out there.
Yeah.
So I don't think it'd be a surprise to see another wide player arrive this summer. But clearly Talbi, comfortable on both flanks, exciting player, was one of the standout players in Belgium last season and in the Champions League. And I think you touched on it there. What's most impressive is these players, Siddiqui, Diarra, Talbi, and Reinildo, but he's different. We're all very much in demand. What Sunderland are saying in these transfer discussions is clearly working, isn't it? They have clearly found a way to sell their vision and make these types of players believe that they're better off going to Sunderland than Leeds or Wolves or various clubs abroad who've been linked. That's a big that bodes well, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does, because all of these players, because of the level that they've been playing at, and not unknown quantities, as we've said, they've had interest from other clubs, they've had interest from clubs over here, they've had interest from clubs on the continent, and yet they've chosen Sunderland. I mean, if we look at Lefay, Diarra, Siddiqui, and now Talbi, which, as I say, we fully expect to go through, I mean, that's roughly £20 million each, isn't it? Roughly. So you're talking about really, upwards of 80 million already on those players. Reinildo, all right, there's not a transfer fee, but there's a pretty hefty commitment on wages there over the next couple of years, you would imagine, given that he's come from Atletico Madrid. So, I mean, how much more can there be? How much further can we go? I mean, we're going to talk about strikers in a second. We're going to talk about a keeper. Feels like if both of them come in for anywhere near those kind of prices, how much further can Sunderland go this summer?
Well, all the indications aren't they, that you're looking at another 40 million? And I know we're just plucking numbers out of it, but so Petravic, for example, who we'll get to, it looks like Sunderland are going to miss out on, but you're talking 20 million for him. Chelsea made it absolutely 25 million.
They were going to pay the neck end of that for Bulker.
Yeah, so clearly you would not continue in negotiations with Chelsea if you didn't have that money to spend, or if you weren't willing to spend that money. And then the striker really, ordinarily, is the most expensive.
Money, yeah.
And all the players that we've talked about, all the players who we'll run through in a minute, who've been linked, and some of them might happen, some of them categorically won't happen. But it's all around that £20 million mark, isn't it? Or 20 million euros or 25 million euros. Which suggests to me, you're looking at another 40 million. Yeah. Just before we get to those other forward players, where do you stand now? And I know we've got a pod in this, I'm sure, in the next couple of weeks. Where do you stand now on Sunderland's chances next season compared to how you were feeling a month ago?
You've got to feel more optimistic, but you've got to couch that in. We haven't seen these players play in the Premier League, in England, in the Premier League, for a team that is still going to be losing more games than it wins, almost certainly next season. So, how does this team come together? It's still a massive unknown quantity. You can't get over that. But have I been impressed, pleasantly surprised by the standard of players Sunderland have been able to bring in? Yes. Have I been impressed, pleasantly surprised by how decisive Sunderland have been in their transfer business, how early they've got an awful lot of this done? Yes, absolutely, I have been. Do I see a plan there? Yes. In the long term, would I be confident of Sunderland continuing to grow and develop as a club no matter what happens next season? Yes. And that was a message I think that Speakman was trying to get over quite early this summer, that look, we want to stay up next season, but we also want to continue what we're doing, which is growing this club for the long term, bringing assets in, strengthening the financial situation, all that. I think all of that, massive ticks boxes all the way along. Are Sunderland going to stay up next season? We still don't know, do we? We like the look of these players. We like the names. We like what they're doing. Are they going to actually be able to do it in the Premier League? That's still the acid test, and we won't know that for a fair while yet. But in terms of the quality of the work that Sunderland are doing, yeah, I think they're in a much stronger position now, clearly, than they were the day that they won promotion. And by dint of that, they have to have a better chance of achieving their aims next season.
We'll all tight on that because there's definitely a pod on that, and assessing various rivals and how their summer's played out. But the keeper situation. Petravic looks potentially like, as
looks Bournemouth bound, doesn't he? I mean, there's stuff coming out from overseas, from Serbia, obviously today, suggesting that it looks like Bournemouth are pretty close to a financial agreement with Chelsea. Petravic seems to be keen on that move. I mean,
what a
understandable, I guess. I mean, for all that we have a Sunderland hat on, and for all that we want, the Sunderland project is massively exciting. Bournemouth are further down the line of establishing themselves as a Premier League team at the minute. Kepa's clearly left. He went back to Chelsea, then went to Arsenal. Sounding like Mark Travers, who was Bournemouth's number 2, was actually on loan at Borough in the second half of last season. Sounds like he might be on his way out. So, it looks like Petravic will be going to Bournemouth as their undisputed number 1, which he wouldn't even be guaranteed at Sunderland, with the Anthony Parsons situation. So I can kind of see that. Obviously, the Bulka thing didn't happen. He went to Saudi Arabia for astronomical sums of money. Pretty clear what swung that decision there. What's interesting is the Sam Johnston suggestions that were knocking about at the weekend, because clearly that is a very different type of signing than either Bulka or Petravic would be. Have Sunderland exhausted the list of goalkeepers that they'd be willing to pay really big money for? And are they now thinking, well, okay, maybe we go in a slightly different direction and we bring in more of a short-term solution to compete with Anthony Patterson for this season, and then we'll readdress it either in January or next summer? That's what a Johnston deal would feel like, doesn't it? So I think the fact that seemed to gain a bit of traction over the weekend suggests that Sunderland are at least considering that kind of a move. And I guess it becomes more likely if Petravic actually does sign on the dotted line and join Bournemouth, doesn't it?
And forward. So just to run through, because
how long have we got?
I was just about to say, someone been the various forwards. So just kind of an update as of today, Tuesday. Armand Lorient, that is clearly one that is live. Sunderland are in for him.
They're in for him, and I think one of the big appeals there is a bit like we were talking about with Talbi. He can really play anywhere across the front, Lorient. He's played out wide. He's played as a 9. He can play through the middle. I think he would give Sunderland a lot of the versatility that is one of the things that they would potentially maybe like.
But all the suggestions are in Italy, as much as claims are he wants to move, that Sunderland haven't reached the asking price
yet. An agreement yet.
Real Madrid, Gonzalo Garcia. I mean, Christ, that was catching one over the weekend. Suggestions are now that is a no-go. Xabi Alonso is not going to sanction.
I mean, he's done so well over in the United States. And I mean, even today I was reading quotes from the Spain boss. Spain, on a tangent, have just appointed Aitor Karanka, ex-Borough boss, as their new technical director, and obviously did a press conference around that. And Luis de la Fuentes, who is the actual Spain boss, couldn't have been more effusive in his praise for Gonzalo Garcia, and basically saying, he's a Spain striker of the future. Maybe now, maybe for the World Cup. So that feels like an incredibly hard deal for Sunderland to pull off. I mean, listen, if you're talking about aiming high and being ambitious, that is that. But yeah, I don't think we're going to be seeing him with a red and white scarf above his head any time yet.
Well, he could just meet Reinaldo in Madrid and do his once
He
he comes
could.
back, do his
He could two with the price, two
medical
medicals
there.
for the price of one.
And Luis Javier Suarez, the Almeria striker,
Yes.
another one kind of aiming high. Well, all the suggestions are that Sporting have identified
Yeah.
him as their top target.
Jokeres replacement. Yeah.
Jokeres. I mean, again, though, just to be in these circles really
Oh,
shows,
well,
shows where Sunderland placing
that's
them.
exactly it. I mean, and Mikatadze obviously as well. There's been a lot of talk around, and again, that the suggestions are that it would be a very expensive and very difficult deal for Sunderland to do. So, in some respects, it feels like they're struggling to make progress on this. But the only reason they're struggling to make progress on it is because they're aiming so high, which has got to be good. Now, I guess the question then is, where do you go to if that's not going to happen? A Bleen, I always have felt is probably a more realistic level of target for Sunderland to be actually pulling off a deal with this summer. And that's a name that's been around for a few weeks now and doesn't seem to be going away. And I just wonder if he's one that if Sunderland's, sky high ambitions aren't going to happen, which, let's be honest, with two or three of them looks like it's not going to. I wonder if a Bleen is probably more the level where they're going to end up at.
And here we go then, the question we've asked before. Will Sunderland sign a number 9? Do you think they'll sign a striker, or do you think...
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that some of those names...
Or like a versatile forward.
Yeah. Some of those names that we've talked about are what I would class as, number 9s. Out-and-out number 9s. Some clearly aren't. It's a cop-out answer, but I think they're willing to consider either. I think it's whichever deal they feel is best. If they feel that the best value out there is an out-and-out number 9, then they'll do that, and they'll back themselves that they've got enough with the addition of Talbi in the wide positions. Maybe that means Mayenda becomes more of a wide option. Alternatively, if they think the best deal is for a player who actually is a wide player really, but who can play up front, then I think they'll happily go with that and back themselves that a combination of that player and Isidore and Mayenda will be enough next season. So just by dint of the fact that they seem to be talking to both types, if you know what I mean, I don't think they're fixated on one or the other.
And just to wrap up, we talked last week about an exodus. There is going to be a load of fringe players going. So Adil Al-Shish, Aberdeen. I don't think I'd have had that on my bingo card.
No, with a deal in place, $1.5 million. It's understood to be for a potential permanent next summer. I mean, which is less of a surprise because I think Sunderland will almost certainly have to loan out some of these players because I just don't think it's realistic that they'll get permanent deals for all of them. But in an ideal world, Adil Al-Shish is not going to play for Sunderland in the Premier League, is he? And so, all right, maybe Sunderland won't be a Premier League team this time next summer, maybe. But even so, I think they'll feel that they'll have moved to a level where Adil Al-Shish still isn't even going to play for them next season in the Championship. They'll be way above that. So there's a number of players there where I think if it has to be a loan, the ideal is at least get some kind of a permanent deal as an option in there. Clearly, Aberdeen will decide whether or not they're going to trigger that. It's not an obligation, I don't think. It's an option. There's a difference there. But if he goes up and does the business in the Scottish Premier, and don't forget, he did reasonably well with Portsmouth in the second half of the last season. Al-Shish, it's not like he disappeared off the face of the earth. So, all things being equal, he should be able to kick on hopefully now at Scottish Premier League level.
Imagine him explaining to his family, showing him the map. So I was at Portsmouth.
Yeah.
The next move
Yeah.
is going to be, I mean, you're saying that like Rusin, Pembele, Bar, they're all the same, aren't they? Where, with respect, if you can get them out on permanent deals, do it. If not, get the loan, and then with a view
That's
to
exactly it. Those players you've mentioned there, Hamia.
yeah, I forgot about him. Equa
Sounds
increasingly looks like that's going to be a permanent.
Equus sounds like St Etienne are actually going to trigger that, doesn't it? Because they got relegated, and the
Yeah,
suggestion then was that they might struggle to be able to do that deal. Now, I suspect there's some renegotiating going on. I suspect that Sunderland are probably going to have to accept less than they would have if St Etienne had been a Ligue 1 club and it had automatically kicked in. But I think that's a hit they'll probably be willing to take because a bit like Alshish, for as long as Regis Labris is Sunderland manager, I don't think there's a way back for Pierre Equa. I think that he's made his decision on that. The decision's been made, and it feels like that deal would be best for all round, doesn't it?
there we go then. Let's see what the next week brings. More signings, more names, more links, perhaps more exits, I'm sure.
A couple of games.
A couple of games, of course, we didn't even mention. So I've got the double header this weekend.
This is
yeah. So Shields and Gateshead on Saturday. I was going to wrap up there without even mentioning.
You are, and you're doing. But I've got. This is bad planning on my. Well, it is bad planning. I will tell you where I'm going instead. I'm going to Sunderland Empire to watch Hamilton, and that's not academicals.
So you're there, and I'm picking up pieces of the friendly doubleheader.
I've got two daughters, and it was part of their Christmas present, and I am under the most intense of 3-line whips that I have to be at that theatre on Saturday afternoon. So while I would love to be at either Gateshead or South Shields, you're dropping on them both.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. We mentioned those like fringe players there. It'll be interesting to see who plays. Are any of the signings going to play? I mean, most of them have
Lefebvre, I guess.
Yeah, the others are all linking up late.
I don't think any of them will be. Yeah, I don't think we'll see any of the new signings, if you like. Like I say, Lefebvre's in a different situation, isn't he? He's part of the core squad, so he might. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many of the real outcasts, if you like, we see, and whether Labris will be drawn, and whether any of them actually have any kind of a future.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to see Anthony Patterson, given everything that's been going on with the goalkeeper situation. You know, where's his head at the minute? It wouldn't be a surprise if his head's a little bit scrambled, really, given everything that's been going on with Sunderland and goalkeepers this summer. So that'll be interesting. And then I guess as well, Neil and Sirkin. You know, will we get the chance to find out if there's actually been any developments on the contract front with them? That's clearly a burning issue. Christian Speakman, made it pretty clear that it was one of the key summer priorities. So, have there been further talks? What's been going on there? And just a first dip back into the water, I guess, before Sunderland's players head off for Portugal and the games they've got over there.
Can't believe it's a year since we first got eyes on the Brees as Sunderland, and it's 4-3-3. It's definitely a 4-3-3.
That's it.
Bellingham
they're always good games, those two. They're always good games because it's been so long without anything. It's on the doorstep. More so Shields than Gateshead. Shields is a lovely little ground to go and watch football at. Gateshead's obviously the athletic stadium. They make the most of it. It's not a proper non-league football ground, is it? If you like to go to, but there's still always good games.
I've been to Shields clearly, but I've not done the Sunderland. You've done Shields and I've done Gateshead the last couple.
Yes, in the past, last year.
And last year, and the way they've tended to do it. So hopefully we'll speak to Labris. I'm not sure, but hopefully we will. We'll definitely speak to someone clearly after the second game.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be Labris because you want to speak to the manager for the first
we'll just get a bit of a handle on where he's at and various updates on bits of things. It's always useful. But
just take a long list.
Well, it will be a long list.
A nod or a shake on where we stand.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Just shake your head for it.
Raise your eyebrows if you.
I wonder if Florent Ghisolfi will be. Is there an executive lounge at Mariners Park?
Well, at Gateshead,
there's got to be something.
At Gateshead, there's that
there's like a
balcony type
bit there. Yeah, I'm not sure what there is at Shields. I've got to admit, but that'll be an eye opener for Florent Ghisolfi.
You would think he'll be there, won't he?
Well, unless he's in
In Madrid with Reinildo.
Madrid with Spain's next number 9.
Well, keep your eyes peeled. The offer, We Are Sunderland offers running across the bottom of the screen there. It's just £1 for 6 months. And subscribe. So subscribe to that, and obviously you'll get full coverage of all our pre-season stuff and into the Premier League season and all of the transfer bits and bobs that will undoubtedly still roll on in the next few weeks. And do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. I know we say it every week, but yeah, those subscriber numbers, we're only looking.
Oh, it's been great. The last few weeks have been really, really great in terms of viewer numbers, subscriber numbers, everything, and it just helps grow it a little bit and obviously get it out there and everything. So yeah, no, that's been brilliant.
Yeah, it does. We really appreciate all the feedback in the comments as well. If you prefer to listen to your podcast platform, I do. To be fair, I listen to pods rather than watch vids. So we appreciate that as well. Just rate and review on there, because that does us a treat. And we'll be back next week, no doubt, talking about more signings, more tittle tattle, and 2 friendlies. What's come of the 2 friendlies? Take care. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.